Hello, Internet, and welcome to another exciting episode of Tokyo Philosophical Society. It's time for your philosophical dinner, so grab your Plato, because tonight we're going to school you on geometry.
Geometry.
Right after we get done talking about the virtues and the deeds. You know what I mean, Meno.
Wow, that was absolutely terrible. All right.
Whoa, wow.
That Plato joke was kind of even almost Japanese. Anyway. My Plato. Anyway.
Yes, we're discussing Plato's Meno, in case you didn't get it from my bad joke.
Yes. So we're going to discuss the Meno. I guess I'm not quite sure where to start here because it's a very strange dialogue. But well, why don't we just talk about what we think the dialogue is about? So what's the dialogue about?
So I thought there was this really nice commentary I was looking at by Dominique Scott, and I just thought it was interesting that in the beginning he listed some of the topics touched on. There's so many topics touched on in the Meno, right? He listed in the theory of recollection, virtue, definition, philosophical method, mathematical method, education, the origins of knowledge, the immortality of the soul, Athenian politics, the distinction between knowledge and true belief. This was his list, and also on top of that, there's desire, weakness of will. This thing is like all over the place. There's so many subjects touched on in this. But my reading this time, I really just focused on knowledge.
Yeah, I mean, so I guess I think maybe I'm speaking for Jesse and I shouldn't, but I think that's kind of where I thought the focus was too. So what do you think the heart? Yeah. Where do you think the heart of this dialogue is? I have a clue. I think this is going to sound weird to say it. I think the heart of this dialogue is Meno's paradox. What do you think of that?
Oh wow! You mean you can't learn anything?
Yeah, I think maybe this is a kind of too simplistic a reading, maybe, but let's start from here. I think this is what Plato ultimately wanted to get at. This kind of, because it starts with Meno kind of is saying, oh, I know what virtue is. What are you, a fool, Socrates? And then Socrates is like, well, that's not what virtue is. You don't know what you're talking about. You're only listing virtues. And finally, Meno just kind of gives up in a hissy fit, and he says, we can't learn anything then, can we? And that's that's the real enemy that Plato's trying to fight, right? This is what Plato wants. He wants to say, no, what's most important is that we look into the truth. I mean, that's why I find Meno's paradox, as strange as it is, to be the heart of the dialogue. Do you disagree, or do you agree?
Yeah, immediately, because after that that's when he launches into the geography lesson. Since I told you guys we'd talk about geography, I was not lying in class.
Geometry. No geography.
With geometry, yes, he starts with the geometry lesson. So in which the point of the geometry lesson I thought was fairly clear. He's trying to represent that learning is this kind of intrinsic, instinctive process that you can kind of work yourself through. It's not like I suppose kind of Meno's idea of learning is being bestowed knowledge by a gorgeous or someone.
Yeah, he seems to use this kind of erratic form of debate, which basically he just uses clever. These are the sophist argument. They use clever arguments to persuade people. That's all they do. They kind of take a whole bold type word. They're all they're interested in is just persuading people and getting them to do what they want them to do, and they're not interested in the truth at all. So, if you want, I'll just read out Meno's paradox. And do you want to start with Meno's paradox? Is there any objections here? No?
Let's go for it.
Go ahead.
All right, so, I mean, I guess simply, Meno's paradox is this. If you know the object already, you cannot genuinely inquire into it. If you do not know the object, then you cannot inquire because you do not even know what you are inquiring into, and either you know something or you don't. Therefore, you cannot genuinely inquire into any object, right? So basically, if you know it, then the inquiry is already over. You don't need to look into it anymore. If you don't know it, then you don't know what to look for, right? Like I guess Hobo said, if I said to look out for all the Hubblebub on the street, you wouldn't know how to inquire into Hubblebub. You just don't know what that is, right? So you couldn't make an inquiry into it. So okay, so but obviously there's a very big problem with this. Is the big problem is we can inquire into things. So why can we do that?
Yes. Wow, that's really interesting. I like where you took this because maybe I almost put the heart of the dialogue in the theory of knowledge as recollection, but I really want to take what you said though and kind of run with it a little bit. What do you think about this? This is what I was thinking about in his theory of knowledge as recollection. So after the Meno's paradox comes up, he launches into this kind of all learning is a kind of recollection. And what do you think about this? I did not take, or I don't think you have to take Socrates literally in what he's saying. I don't think he even needs you to take him literally. And I'm going to try and back this up just a little bit. So, and see, I think what Socrates is trying to get at when he talks to the slave boy is, if you notice what he does when he calls it recollection, what the slave boy does, what Socrates does is he asks questions and directs the boy's attention at certain aspects of the square. And this is what Socrates is calling recollection, by focusing the boy's attention on certain aspects of the square rather than other aspects of the square. And this is what I think Socrates is really getting after. This is what he thinks knowledge is. It's directing your attention in the right direction. So knowing where to look. And let me just say, like, I think Plato is onto this point, and he actually, if you recall to the Republic, he perfects this in the Republic. If you remember, right after the allegory of the cave in the Republic, page, was it Stephanus, in the Stephanus notes, 518b to d. This is what he says right after the allegory of the cave, when the guy gets out of the cave, right, and he goes back and he says, what do you think they would do? Would they kill him? He's like, yes, they would kill him, Socrates. And this is what Socrates says after. He says, this point has to be made about education. He says, education is not what professions of certain men assert it to be. They presumably assert that they put into the soul, they presumably assert that they put into the soul knowledge that isn't in it, as though they were putting sight into blind eyes. But the present argument, on the other hand, indicates that this power is in the soul of each, and the instrument with which each learns, just as an eye is not able to turn toward the light from the dark without the whole body, must be turned around from that which is coming into being together with the whole soul until it is able to endure looking at that which is, and the brightest part of that which is. I think this is kind of Socrates. This is what really Socrates is after with the slave boy. This is what he's really after with the theory of recollection, which is this really cool theme in the Republic, which was turning around, looking at the right things. And I think this reverberates in the entire dialogue. Meno had the ability to see the right things. He just wasn't looking at them. In the very beginning of the dialogue, Socrates said, "What is virtue?" And he started listing virtues. He was looking at all the wrong qualities, though. He wasn't looking at the ones that stayed the same. He was looking at the ones that are different. Socrates needed to move his attention from those qualities to those core qualities he needed to see to learn, right? And I don't know. I think this is really, I don't know. What do you think about this? I think this was, maybe this reading is controversial, but I think this is kind of what he was after here. Don't you think?
Yeah, I've had a similar impression of that whole geography lesson. Not quite as refined as yours, but it seemed like he was trying to combat a view like the one you just brought up. You mentioned the Republic, where knowledge kind of is inserted upon people by the teacher. There's no way to get to it other than have the teacher tell you how. But it was Socrates with his idea of it being in the soul, a function of the soul. He makes it into an intrinsic, instinctive process. Says, we are capable of learning by ourselves. And the teacher, all he does is what you just talked about. out is he just kind of helps you, guide you in a way that you learn for yourself, not by somehow magically zapping facts onto your soul.
Don't you think that Meno too is kind of the result of that kind of form of education? When he comes finally to his, what he really wants to say is, what he really deep down believes is, you can't do any of this stuff. There's nothing to find. There's nothing to discover, right?
You just told something, and you either believe that or there's nothing else, right? There's nothing really in between.
There's this competition of wills fighting against one another, right? And there's nothing beyond that. There's no truth to be got to, because there's no way to get to truth. We just can't do it. And you can kind of almost hear that opinion echoed in the modern world, like, well, there's no point in arguing about philosophy. And there's no truth to get to, right? There's nothing to look at. It's all just opinions. It's all just kinds of opinions, and it's just opinion fighting opinion, and that's all there is. Which is the result of a kind of a loss of the belief in truth, Adam. So I mean, I really, okay, you already got to it first, but I like where you took the doctrine of recollection. So I mean, so when Plato says he directs the eye to the unchanging, so how can we beat Meno at his game, right? He says we can't learn anything. I mean, the obvious answer is that we do inquire into things and we know them, but we only partially know them, right? I mean, that's the obvious answer. Right?
And how I was kind of thought about it was, inquiry is like looking for one missing part of a machine or something. And if you open up, this is back in the days of mechanical machines, not so much with digital machines anymore, but hard to open up an automobile, it's not running. And I could kind of look around and say, okay, looks like I'm missing something here. I watch how the engine moves and I see how it's missing something. So I inquire into that missing part by knowing what it's missing. So anytime you're inquiring into something, you're inquiring into something that's a piece of a larger picture you're seeing. Like when I see something, I hold up this cup and I ask, what's this cup? It's because this is the part of the system I don't know how to identify. But you inquire into the kind of the blanks things in your picture. Sure, you don't have to know what's in that blank to inquire what's in that blank.
I mean, you talked about focusing their attention on the unchanging, right? I mean, and this is where this dialogue gets really interesting because, they're in some of the supplementary dialogue or supplementary texts, and even Professor Hobel talked about sample thinking and system thinking, and this is the big part of it. I mean, what Meno does is he looks at various samples of things, and what Socrates is looking for is the essence of, I don't know, cup or virtue or chair or whatever you want to, bees, whatever you want to talk about, and so I don't know, this is what I found really interesting about the dialogue is that's what, right, Socrates is trying to look for essences, whereas as Meno is looking for kind of this sample of everything, right? So, but I mean, you really can, when you're learning about empirical facts of the world, right? For example, what a cup is, you do have to look at cups, right? You can't think your way to cup. I mean, you have to look at various kind of cups, and then, like Socrates says, turn your attention to whatever is kind of fuzzily stable in cup. I mean, we know it can't be clear cut thanks to Wittgenstein now, but it's going to be a fuzzy, some kind of definition, right? I mean, it's going to be a fuzzy. We don't call everything cup, so something is cup.
Yeah.
Something we recognize as cup, no matter what that may be, right? Is going to be this kind of fuzzier definition. So, I mean, oh, please.
I was just saying, even with cup, something as clear as that, I'd be very hard pressed to give a solid definition of it.
Yeah,
not everything holds for everything is a cup.
Right. I mean, so we can inquire with partial knowledge of things, but using that partial knowledge, we can either, with empirical facts like cup, we can look at more samples of cups and then look for similarities within it. What I really like is, what I thought was really interesting is in this dialogue, there's this kind of split between a priori, and a posteriori, which is this Kantian split, right? And what Socrates is, I put him on the side of this kind of a priori kind of truth. And Meno and Jonathan Haidt and these guys are kind of an a posteriori kind of truth, right? They want to look at a bunch of samples and see things. But I mean, what's really fascinating, I think, what's really great about this dialogue is that right now, this is what we're talking about with problems of morality and virtue. This can bring it back to virtue a little bit, because the dialogue starts with the talk about virtue. But how do we find out about virtue? Well, isn't it what's really interesting is we actually need both. We need the a posteriori look at what people consider kind of virtues. We need to look into the world and see, oh, this is what people consider virtues. These are the kind of virtues. But that doesn't tell us what virtue should be or what virtues we should take. So virtue kind of exists in between these two, between Meno and Socrates, right? And this battle between Meno and Socrates continues to this day, where people are looking for the essence of virtue, and then other people are saying, look at all these different kinds of virtues. I mean, this is the fight of relativism, right, versus this kind of, I don't know, deontological kind of thought process, right? These two figures of fighting kind of in some Star Trek way to this very day, right? And virtue somehow is linked in between these two. I don't know. I thought that was really one of the most interesting parts about this dialogue.
Oh, wow, yeah, I like that. I like that reading of the dialogue a lot. I mean, it strikes me too that like as I was reading it, like Meno is a guy who wants to learn virtue. He wants to know if it's teachable anyway, but he doesn't know what it is, right? So it's kind of interesting that like maybe you would need to at least get some grip on what it is in order to at least manipulate it, or to change it, or to do anything to it. You need to get a little bit of conceptual grip on what it is, or else you just become kind of dominated by it, right? It's just kind of whatever your friend says it is, or whatever your parents say it is, right? Unless you try to get some kind of grip on what's uniting all of these cases, you're kind of lost in this whirlwind of different examples, never sure which one is which and how they fit together. It just seems like the project that Socrates would engage in would be one of refining and honing to something greater and better, too.
Right, he's going to give us a clear vision of what virtue is. But I mean, there isn't that one of Socrates' I think a difficulty to have to overcome is the idea that maybe virtue doesn't fit together.
Yeah. Definitely.
They don't all neatly come together. Possible.
Yeah, well, a lot of the things we call virtue are contradictory.
Yeah.
You know, courage and prudence again, they're not exact contradictory, but they don't necessarily go together. And I probably you can think of a better example than I could, but.
I mean, like Socrates eventually comes to this kind of almost Aristotelian point where he's like, well, what the ultimate virtue is knowing when to use your virtues.
Yeah.
Which is, I really like that part of the dialogue. It's really interesting, although, as has been criticized, it's virtually impossible to do. And Plato's going to talk about why that is in the Republic.
Yeah.
So this dialogue talks a lot about virtue, and why not? Why not just talk about virtue a little bit, seeing as how we're here, and for the purposes of this dialogue, right? It's not virtue like we know it. It's all about excellence. So you think of Wayne and Garth. And they'd be like, well, how does one become excellent? And then Socrates changes the question, what is excellence? So if we can take it back to, I mean, this eternal debate between, what is excellence? I mean, I don't know if we can solve what virtue is right here, right? I mean, I think it really does lie between both of them, right? I mean, like, because virtue can't not apply to the world. Right? It can't all be a priori. It can't be all prior to experience, right? If virtue was, I don't know, kill yourself, that would be insane. Okay. It can't have no relation to the world, right? It's got to have some relation to the world. So in a sense, it has to have some connection to experience. But then again, it can't be just experience because we want some virtues over the other. So I mean that's when the real thought begins, right? I mean, like, so what do we take as a good virtue? Do we take purity or in group out group? I mean, and then I guess, some people is trying to step in and say, like Sam Harris will say, like, we can actually look at the world, we can look at experience to see which one of these virtues is the best, right? We can look at how human societies flourish. But I mean, like, what flourishing is, again, there's going to be something, I'm going to sound weird to say this, a priori about this, a kind of a prior to experience. And by that I don't mean like outside of the universe, but it could be just the makeup of the human mind itself, right? The human mind is so situated that it flourishes in this kind of virtue set, right? And that could be in a kind of set somehow universally in us, and we could try to discover that. I mean, it's possible that you wouldn't need experience to do that.
It could be possibly an evolutionary disposition towards certain sets of virtue.
But I mean, the ultimate thing you have to realize, though, which is going to be the difficult battle, is, right? I mean, like, without human beings, I don't know if we're all going to agree on this. Without human beings, there is no excellence. I mean, like, you couldn't say, not just virtue, excellence, right? I mean, like, without people, because people are here, we can say, well, the sun is good at giving off heat. Yeah, but that's because we're giving it a virtue scale, right? Oh, good, it's good at this, and it's not good at that. But all of these things, I mean, they just are, right? They just exist in the universe. When we say, like, a table is good at holding things up, well, yeah, that's because that's what we think a table is. It's something to hold things up, right? But that's all from here, right? It doesn't come from the universe at all. So all these virtue schemas only come into the universe because we are in the universe, right? And this is all a product of the universe. So I mean, like, you have to deal with all these factors when you're trying to. I mean, this is where it's so complicated to go from, well, look at all the things that people believe are virtues, and then people are going to step in and say, well, this is the correct virtue. And Sam Harris is kind of funny. He's on both sides a little bit, right? He's like, well, he does believe in empiricism, but he's arguing for a certain set of virtues. Socrates and all these other people are going to be arguing that one kind of a set of virtues is going to be better than the other. But I can see the cynics saying, we just read Camus, like, ultimately, who can say what a better life is? He would say. He would say a lucid life, but he would say, I don't even know if he'd call that a better life, though. He would just call it a more intense life. I don't know.
That's a tough one, yeah. He seemed to think it was better, but
I don't know. This is where I kind of disagree with Camus. I mean, like, if I took that bold step and said that Shakespeare is better than peanut butter, bold.
That's a dangerous step, yeah.
Write me 8 letters later. It's dangerous, right? But for the service of life. So I would, for example, for me, or maybe I'm been influenced by Nietzsche too much or something, but like morality in the service of life, right? A flourishing life, whatever that flourishing means, and that's the kind of debate we have to have. But anyway, so like all of that as a prelude to. I made this pyramid of virtue. I just wanted you to know. I wanted to ask you what you think of my virtue pyramid.
Wow. Okay.
So with all of this in mind, and I know full well that all this is in the background. So I made this virtue pyramid, and I thought, like, I was thinking about, so what is virtue? If I was going to, like, I was on a debate with Meno, and we really wanted to just skip all the Socratic, what's the essence of virtue, and we just want to get down to, for some reason, even though we don't know, we only half know, get down to the nitty gritty. What would you think about this? Like, virtue is a pyramid of 3 things. It's a pyramid of knowledge, action, and emotion, right? And all of 3 of them together, if you have all 3 of them together, you can act excellently or virtuously. But the lack of one of these elements leads to a kind of warped or a kind of bad action, or lesser action. How about we put it like that?
Could we rephrase that? That kind of tweak your categories just a little bit and make it so it's a set of three triangles, and one is wisdom, one is courage, and one is power.
Oh, okay, but I'm going to leave out power there. I don't know. Power is scary.
We're going to leave Ganon out of the equation here?
Yeah, I think his Triforce, I don't know. Is it good for virtue?
Well, of course, because virtue is the desire for good things and the power to get it, right?
Oh, yes, right. Of course. But if you got them in an unjust way, Ganon, like by hiding all the rupees in the grass, then, it's bad.
But isn't it Link who's stealing the rupees from the grass? But all right, anyway.
I don't know, actually.
Sorry, I took too much time on my bad joke.
I just wanted to emphasize what I said before, that virtue exists between two worlds, right? It exists as knowledge and action. And that this is really the real conflict that this dialogue comes in, right? That there's something going on here between these two characters.
I think Socrates has you on all except for emotion there. He's going to say the mindfulness of when to do things.
Yeah.
So that's the way there has to be this connection between knowledge and action. And
right. I mean,
implicitly imply emotion, but I would, if you probably threw that at Socrates, it seems like he would say yes.
Yeah, I hope so. Maybe I don't know how he'd feel about my emotion, but I'm giving in to the bad wizards and others who would say, like, you need something to get the thing started, right? Well,
yeah, I mean, like, you could almost, emotion goes really close to, like, it has action tendencies. Emotions have action tendencies in them, so, I mean, like, it falls close to the action side. They can produce the impetus for good action anyways.
Emotion also has knowledge, doesn't it?
Right, exactly.
So, I mean, what's interesting is the other thing I liked about this dialogue, besides the eternal conflict between Socrates and Meno, is the last part of the dialogue, which is this talk about
right opinion.
Yeah, right. Which is the talk about true belief, or right opinion, or knowledge. And he talks about how there are virtuous people in the world, right? There are these gentlemen of Athens, but they're all raising kids that are losers, they're losers, basically. And I don't know, I really, really like this because it reminds me of all the people that say read Steve Jobs' I don't know, biography or something, or Bill Gates. But, okay, this is the problem, and this is the problem with being virtuous, because I made my pyramid of knowledge, action, emotion, but that's not entirely true, is it? All of this has to take place within a system, like I was describing, right? I mean, you could have all three of these things, and you'd still be a jerk in a bad system, or if you're in conflict with the system.
Yeah.
So for all three of these to work, the knowledge part has to encompass not only you, but all of the system itself. But don't you think it also has to encompass the past and the future, right? Like, sometimes you could ask appropriately, but the future just turns wrong. It goes bad. You're unlucky. For example, I don't know, Steve Jobs was born in Cambodia. All right? End of the game there. No matter how Steve Jobs you are, Cambodia ain't going to give you that technical training to get there. Or whatever misfortune, like, I don't know, this is where you have to pray to the Roman god Fortuna. Because to be excellent, you not only need all of these things, you also need the past and the future to work for you. So in order to be excellent in any system, it's going to be so incredibly hard, to the point where you need all that excellent stuff that whatever Steve Jobs had, but he was also in the right place and in the right time. It's uncontrollable, right? And so what was right for him, his truth, won't be right for everyone else. Reading Steve Jobs' bibliography won't make you Steve Jobs. It can't. Even if it was knowledge for him, it's already changed. Because of factors that are just uncontrollable. The past and the future, where you were born, your luck, all of that is encompassed within a virtuous or excellent lifestyle, right? So this is what you can't tie down. I mean, this is why, like when Socrates says in the end, virtue can't be taught. In a way, I mean, or excellence can't be taught. In a way, excellence is not in your control. You can't control being excellent sometimes. Sometimes it really is up to fortuna and moral luck, if you want to call it that, which is what I'm really relating this back to.
I think.
Moral luck. And that sometimes you can do everything right and still end up terrible.
Yeah. I mean, if you're taking in the sense of succeed.
Yeah, that's what I mean, excellence.
Yeah, by that kind of excellence, like succeeding, like a Steve Jobs, definitely. Yeah.
Even if you think
that was just a roundabout way to get back to moral luck.
Yeah. But yeah, even if you think on a lesser scale, being kind and giving is considered a virtue. But if I were to say I see a homeless guy and I say, here, man, and get yourself out of a nice meal, I give him a handful of bills, and he uses that to go out and buy a gun and go on a killing spree. I'm not going to go down in history as a kind and caring man.
I mean, it has to be that system, right?
Yeah, the system that, again, includes past and future.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, I was thinking, like, the Meno's paradox. I think the fact that we can, like you said, maybe you mentioned, like, how is it that we can inquire into things we don't know? I mean, I think, or that we can, how is it that we can half know things or partially know things? I don't know. I kind of think that Socrates or Plato has it on his mind that this is indicative of the fact that you are part of something larger. That's how this is possible. You are part of the universe. You are part of the system, and that's how you can interact with it. There's not this gap between you and the system. That's why you have it in you, because you're already part of it. You're already part of the system, and you need to take a look at that system. You need to have knowledge of that system. In order to get this knowledge, you need to look at the right places.
So yeah, I was trying to get it earlier with my machine system missing.
Yeah.
You did, of course, you did much better than I.
No, I like that. I like that analogy. What you said, Jesse. Yeah, I like that too. But Dustin, you said about Meno only being able to succeed if conditions are right, and I mean this dialogue really does lead into the Republic. Really does. I kind of on this note, I think there's. I don't know. I personally found the end of the dialogue kind of. Sometimes when I reread it, I kind of felt the Meno was very dark. It struck me as a very, almost like a dark carnival sometimes when I read it one time. And let me just say why a little bit. So Socrates and Meno meet, and Meno asks Socrates about virtue. Why? Because he wants to have power. Meno can't even remember what Gorgias, his teacher, told him. He just repeats what other people tell him all the time. They have a big discussion. Meno still really hasn't gotten it. Nobody's really gotten it. The only really person who kind of got something out of it was the slave boy. And then Socrates reaches over to the other guy standing there, Antaeus. And he says, "Hey, Antaeus, come over here." And guess who Antaeus is? He's one of the guys who's going to be responsible for killing Socrates. And I mean, I don't know. I really think that this is what Plato is after. Why he brought Antaeus in the conversation?
Because he was very unnecessary. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not so core, but I think it's a piece of irony. The reason why Antaeus is in this conversation is a large piece of irony directed, kind of dark humor and irony directed at Athens. Why? Why do I think that? Because he asks Antaeus about the sophists, right? And Antaeus is like, "I would never let anyone I know ever get near one of those stupid sophists. If you want to be virtuous, just talk to any old Athenian citizen, and they can help you out more than those stupid sophists can. It just again, I think this dialogue in the Republic echo back and forth. Republic, page 491 to 492. This is in that book 6, in that really excellent section before the ship. Socrates says, "Or do you believe, as do the many, that certain young men are corrupted by sophists, and that there are certain sophists who in a private capacity corrupt to an extent worth mentioning? Isn't it rather the very men who say this are the biggest sophists, who educate most perfectly, and who turn out young and old, men and women, just the way they want them to be?" I mean, this is the section Socrates is bashing on the crowd. The crowd is the biggest sophist. The crowd uses shouting, clapping, blame, praise, dishonor, fines, and finally death for anyone it disagrees with. It churns out this system of people that it wants to have. And so Antius turns out to be the biggest sophist, standing right before him, ragging on all the other sophists. And so here he is. He turns to Antius, and like Antius is the guy who's going to kill him, and he's like, "Hey, Antius, are there any guys who can teach virtue?" I think it struck me as dark in the sense that there was a guy who was interested in what could get us there, and he was Socrates, and Antius killed him. Right? It's just so dark. It's just the crowd won, the stupid, lazy guy went on to become a general, or he didn't really meet a good end himself. Yeah. I mean, the whole dialogue is so dark on some levels.
And while we're on that point, and let me to add some fuel to your fire there, remember what Socrates was accused of, right?
Corrupting the youth.
And you remember what
gods.
He talks about with Antius? Why the sons of great men aren't as good.
Because of the sons are terrible, right? It's true. Yeah. It's true, yeah. That is another joke, isn't it? The sons were terrible anyway. So, yeah, I don't know. That's why that's the way I read the end of the dialogue. That's why I think Antius is partially brought in. He is like an echo of Meno too, in a sense. He can be read as an echo of Meno, because he also has like a moment of aporia, and like he also warns Socrates in like an echo. But I think this is the main reason, is kind of an all-encompassing irony on the futility of everything that's going on in front of these like clueless people.
Yeah. There's the bizarre thing, because he's doing. When you think about what Antius was doing, is he was doing exactly what Meno starting out for doing. Meno was like, can you teach virtue? Socrates is like, tell me what virtue is. Meno's like, okay, here's an example, here's an example, here's an example, here's an example. Well, and Antius is like, well, here's an example of somebody in Athens. Here's an example of somebody in Athens. Here's an example of somebody in Athens who can teach you virtue.
Yes.
He never once goes into the qualities of what would be necessary to teach virtue. What would be the underlying thread that tied all teachers of virtue together, unless he thinks that a condition for being a teacher of virtue is being an Athenian, which he might have. He's just listing off examples. He doesn't really get to the core of the question, and so he's echoing Meno on that level too.
That's a good point.
I like that a lot. What you said, both of you. I really like this part at the end. I did feel it was as dark as you said too. And I don't let's take it to real life now. Like now, I mean, why are we reading this anyway? What's the point? Like, people would say. So doesn't this happen even now? That the good conservative man, whoever he may be, all he's interested in doing is raising his son to be the same as him, so that the farmer is always the farmer and the virtues carry on forever, which it ends up corrupting. That's the corruption, right? Is that they don't have any ability to react to a changing world, right? I mean, that's why what's going on here is important, right? Is that if you think all you have to do is be like 1950s America, right, which is what some kind of Fox News conservative will come on the air and say, well, we have to get back to old-style virtues and stuff. Well, I mean, that just won't work anymore. That can't do the trick anymore, no matter how much you wanted to do, because the situation in the world has changed. And that's what's important into looking into virtue. So, for example, maybe we can save Steve Jobs a little bit. We can say, yes, read Steve Jobs, but realize that you can't copy Steve Jobs, right? You can't copy him, but maybe you can look into something else inside of him. What he was able to do in his given situation, right? I mean, this is what's important to learn. I mean, but it seems like too many people take, I mean, even, okay, we'll just say, like, even in Japan, too, that the simplistic route is taken is, well, all you have to do is copy your upper-ups and everything will be fine, but that's simply just not the way of the world. Right. And that's why it's important to learn, I guess, if you're kind of sick of Socrates, you know, you think he's playing with definitions and word games, why should we look into the essence of virtue or excellence? Well, this is why, because the world is changing, and but that doesn't mean let's give up learning. You can't learn anything because the world is changing, and it's kind of Heraclitean mist, right? You can look at the different examples of virtue and maybe see something that you can grab onto in the midst of a changing world, and use that as some kind of flashlight in the darkness to lead you towards virtue somehow, right? And that could be an important message here, I think, anyway.
That seems to speak to Socrates' definition of mindfulness.
Yeah.
He's like, okay, listen, you know, everything's changed. You know, so the most virtuous thing you can do is be reactive to what's around you. Do what you need to do in that situation, which, of course, is incredibly difficult. Yeah. Well, in the same way, we can look at this as why the sons of great Athenians were so bad, because their fathers were teaching them their virtues. It was just they were bestowing upon them the exact same virtues that made them great in a different system, in the system of the past, which was no longer viable in the system of the future. But they did not bestow upon them this mindfulness, this adaptiveness that would have been required for them to adapt these old school virtues to the new system.
Yeah, which is, I think, one thing you can at least say is a practical, benefit. You want to be that kind of, realistic about it, of learning about, for example, excellence or something, right? I mean, you just the world isn't such a place that you can copy Steve Jobs and hope to win, right? It's just not possible.
I have a great idea for a product. What do you guys think of this? It's a kind of like a computer, but it's contained in a thin, like almost like slate type thing, and there's a screen, but it's not going to be like a regular screen like on your computer. It's a screen that if you touch it, you can kind of like interact with it and touch it.
Okay. I make sure it's also already been invented by Stanley Kubrick and Microsoft years before, and then resell it as something new and hip and cool when it's really not that inventive or creative.
Okay.
Go.
No. Awesome. All right, so I got my idea here.
Okay. Whew.
It's got a reverse time.
Yeah. Gotta set all the things back in place.
Yeah, I kind of sometimes I think that maybe people are resistant to modify the things that brought them up because they feel like they themselves are being denied. Maybe they didn't realize what was really great about what made them great themselves, so they kind of feel like that their life is being denied by changing these processes too. Oh. Maybe if they had looked a little bit deeper, if they had looked a little bit more out, they wouldn't feel this way about being denied like to the core of their existence, the fact that they have to change their ways.
So this is also, we got to this in Camus. So you kind of, by questioning yourself, attempting to change how you're living, into people who try to work their lives into this story, it's almost like saying that everything that happened previously in your little story has been wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Somehow the fact that I have to change means I was not acting properly up until this point, and that's why I have to change.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this also reminds us of why we have to talk about what's really important, right? I mean, like, for example, an old soldier. might complain, oh, the kids these days, they don't have guts. They're not willing to really fight for what they believe or something, right? Like, but okay, yeah, when you're fighting the Nazis, we needed those guts. But, for example, we really don't need to be bombing so many places right now. That's not what's necessary. So what was necessary for success at one time might actually not even be a virtue right now. We don't need more soldiers now. We need more thinkers. We need people to think about what's really important, what really makes us tick and go, and what makes a flourishing life. What is it to be a flourishing human being? You just can't fall into that.
Yeah, it's one thing I like about Plato so much is the fact that he focuses so outward, right? Everything is set in this larger and larger system, which of course eventually is structured by the good itself. And speaking of that, can I shift our topic a little bit?
All right.
Can I shift to the argument that no one desires what is bad? Just a little bit.
Okay.
This is kind of halfway through, a little bit in. Meno defines virtue as wanting the best things in life and having the power to get them, which you mentioned before. And Socrates objects to this in a strange way. He objects to the first part of it in the sense that it's trivial because no one really wants or desires what is bad, knowing that it's bad. And, of course, this is there's a kind of a immediate gut reaction against this. Like, what are you talking about, Socrates? People want things that are bad for them all the time. But I just want to let's put that on the side just a little bit for a second. I think some people, in the literature anyway, they attribute to Socrates a kind of theory of what's called psychological eudaimonism, which is, or at least, I don't know, in one of the commentaries they said this was one theory attributed to Socrates, which means this is the belief that a person will desire something if and only if they believe it contributes to their overall happiness. Therefore, a desire will make you miserable will not form in the first place. Which, of course, then immediately triggers the attack of weakness of the will. Right? This is how weakness of the will gets into this conversation. Like, well, what about people who think it would be better to go to the gym, but they don't go to the gym? Those people know that it's bad to go to the gym, not to go to the gym, but they stayed home and eat potato chips anyway. But what if? Okay, I just want to kind of pontificate on my own a little bit here on this. What if this? What Socrates is getting at is a little bit different than this. What if it fits in with what we were talking about, this theory of knowledge as recollection? What if, this is what I thought, maybe, what if Socrates doesn't necessarily want to say that people desire things if they think it will lead to their overall happiness, but just that, like the slave or Meno himself at the beginning of the argument, the person who desires something bad or something that will make him miserable isn't focusing on the right things. He's not directing his attention on things. So therefore, he has no knowledge of these things per se, right? So he's focusing on the good taste of the donuts rather than on the knowledge of a virtuous life, right? He's got his mind in other places where it shouldn't be. And this, I think, this theory is also refined and fleshed out in the Republic, where it's finally divided up into reason desires things that are wholes based on the good, and desire the part of your soul wants parts only. But I guess this leaves room to put Socrates in this camp of people who think weakness of the will is a kind of a shifting in thought. You're shifting between what's good overall and what's good now. Overall now. So people who have this weakness of the will problem, it's more of a directing of attention in the wrong places. And I think this is more, I don't know, I don't think it fits more with the dialogue, and I think it's a very defensible position for the existence of weakness of the will in the first place. And do you have any thoughts on? If not, I do
Hmm.
have one more thing, but
Now, I don't know, the question would be, because you're put it as like a matter of focus,
hmm.
though we could also reframe it as a matter of belief. It's like, okay, I know going to the gym is going to make me healthier, and I know that a healthy life is a happier life, but maybe be as much as I kind of know how this works, how the rhetoric works in my head, it's still not ingrained enough that I can overweigh what I do know is going to make me happy, which would be rather than going to the gym, sitting and playing video games. And I don't have okay, maybe this is a similar thing. I don't have knowledge of the potential happiness that lays at the end of this diligent exercise route. But
Hmm.
I know the happiness that lays at the end of this open ideas route. So I'm more inclined to take what I know 100% and to
Hmm.
contribute to my happiness.
Yeah, which would be like a more of a now or short term
Yeah.
happiness, right? Again, no. The word "no" is here is drifting into almost non-cognitive realms, which I'm
Mm,
fine with. I don't think Socrates has a big problem with that. When he calls like knowledge recollection,
mm,
something seems non-cognitive about that too. Or in the Republic, where he says it's knowledge is like turning around and focusing, like something there seems to be something almost non-cognitive about that too. Or it's rooted in some kind of non-cognitive thing, like an action.
mm.
Um, so yeah, I don't know. I kind of this is just what I cooked up as my reading of what Socrates is on about here in this. If you don't have do you have anything else?
No, I just
Okay.
liked how it reminded me of the tyrant in book nine.
Oh.
Um, it was, the
Ah.
tyrant is the ultimate form of this, right? He's fallen into his desires, right?
Yeah.
Um, this is, I guess,
Because
what the end process of this, right?
yeah, it's interesting that you bring up the tyrant because the tyrant and the king were not all that different. The main difference was how they focused their desires and what their goals were.
Hmm.
The king, he pursued a more or like ultimate and good from seeing the whole of the situation and how his city. Yeah, I guess we want to stick with the city, how the city would turn out. Whereas the tyrant was only going after his short-term gains.
Isn't Meno almost like that tyrant too? He's only focused about getting more power
Yeah.
or being king or getting more powerful and virtuous. He doesn't care about the whole. He's already kind of a tyrant.
Yeah.
Mm,
He's on his way to being Thrasymachus-esque, I guess. On his way, not there, but.
mm.
Um, so okay, I have one more thing to say. Before I say it, I'm gonna stop right here. I'm gonna say, red alert. Someone who used Google is going to talk about science. So don't believe what I'm about to say. This is Google Science right here. Google Science to the rescue. Don't trust me. I am not a neuroscientist, even though I might look like one. No. So here's my Google Science for you. Please, take it with a handful of salt and throw it at me as you listen to me. But like, so like even addiction, I was trying to look up what is the neurological problem of addiction. And apparently none of this is solved by any means, but like some of the how addicts get formed, or at least this is what some people think now, is that addiction changes the structure of your brain, and it affects your prefrontal cortex, and it affects in a lot of ways. But I just want to pick out two ways that addiction affects your prefrontal cortex. One, your prefrontal cortex helps you override impulsive urges, which would allow you to consider consequences of your actions. In other words, to see things in a larger picture. And two, um, when your prefrontal cortex is damaged, your ability to rationally think may be limited. So you might incorrectly tally the cost and benefits of things, overestimating benefits and minimizing costs in the short term. Or at least this is what some people think. So like maybe the problem of the addict is they are unable via some neurochemistry to direct their attention to the big picture. They've actually come to the point where they don't have that ability to turn around. They don't have the ability to focus on the bigger picture anymore. This is why they would need some kind of, medication or behavioral therapy treatment to give them that ability back. So maybe again, warning, maybe it's possible to lose that ability through addiction, through hardcore addiction.
Isn't I mean, like, I don't know. This is kind of going off of Plato a little bit here, but okay. So I know that the sophists and other people would often say this in the 7 Habits of Highly Successful People, but I don't. Isn't it a habit? Don't you have to when you train people to be philosophers, even don't you have to make it a habit of strengthening the prefrontal cortex and thinking in terms of wholes, right? I mean, you have to make it, I don't know, habitual, but it can't be simply the action at hand, right? I mean, you have to think bigger than that, but you have to somehow train your brain somehow, slowly but surely, to be able to strengthen your prefrontal cortex so you can think like this, whatever it is. Whether I think isn't that strengthening what doesn't Plato think that strengthening is geometry?
I think so. Yeah.
That's the
Definitely.
weightlifting you do to get this so strong that you can look at holes.
Yeah. I think that's kind of what he's after.
Yeah. What were the people studying the Republic? It was gymnastics and music.
Those are the two. There were the two.
Poetry in your science or whatever, or poetry in your arguments or something. Wasn't that it? Or
Well, they didn't get arguments until they were 20.
Yeah.
to get into his academy.
Yeah.
What was it like? To get into the academy, you had to study geometry for like 10 years or something. And
the academy. Sorry, I was saying the Republic, but.
Okay, in the Republic. Okay.
Yeah, in the Republic, it was music and gymnastics, right?
Something like that. Yeah. You had to be trained in them for a long time.
Yeah.
The music was like everything. It was all poetry, and then gymnastics was all these athletic, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, like, I don't know where to come to that, because I was kind of suggesting that virtue can't be, or at least excellence can't be taught, but I think eventually I'm going to have to fall to the conclusion that yes, it's very difficult, and we really have to think about what we're doing, which is what's important, why we have to look at essences. But in a certain sense, philosophy can be taught, but it's a very difficult process, and it requires not only just thinking about it once in a while, but it requires habitual strengthening of your prefrontal cortex. And if you don't, you become 2 minds of things, and eventually 1 mind, only in the present, right? I don't know. So, can virtue be taught?
Okay. What if I say, because we have this whole with the system argument with past and future included, that obviously I cannot tell you
that you'll be successful.
But you can certainly, I can hedge your bets. Well, maybe not me. Okay, I'm not a good teacher of virtue or excellence or anything, whatever you want to call it. But somebody who would be able to teach you how to at least hedge your bets.
Yeah, that's the best we can. I think that's the best we can say, isn't it?
Yeah. Or if you could somehow cut these things off, like the Stoics did. They just threw off worldly success.
Oh.
And just these ones that are in your head, the ones you can control. Those are the ones that we keep. The other ones just give up.
But I guess isn't the difficulty that we're talking about. This is what prompts the Republic, right? Because it's easier to be that virtuous man in the Republic than it would be in a chaotic world.
Yes. Yeah.
Thus, he says, well, maybe he realizes, it's really, really tough to be a virtuous man when the world around you just doesn't work right. and so you got to make it better or easier somehow to do, even though still that's not guaranteed.
Yeah. Yeah. Easier to be excellent, or a world that is conducive of flourishing of humankind, right? Which hopefully would be the Republic.
Yeah.
With your bronze soul.
Unless you're born a bronze soul and love it. You're gonna love it. Go about bartering and trading, whatever it is you bronze soul people do.
Hey, that's the best place for those people, Jesse. Come on.
They're never getting out of there.
Those
It's a good place for them.
I like how even the way we refer to it in jest is still so in that. Those bronze soul people.
I did like, though, what they were bringing up in the lectures, Hobel did too, like, about how people extol the virtues of Steve Jobs, but they never extol the virtues of the factory worker in China or something, or the factory worker in Japan. The Japanese seem to be more into it, or they'd be more in touch with the kind of the virtues of the worker.
Yeah.
In America, we are more in tune with the virtues of the president or the leader.
The queen bee.
The queen bee, basically. And this is going to sound so arrogant. Like, the bronze people, they're good where they are. Let's put it more nicer, right? Like, there is a virtue to being a worker, right? I mean, it shouldn't be humiliating to be part of a system. If you consider that system just, you don't have to be at the top. It shouldn't be humiliating.
Yeah. Actually, if you're in Plato's Republic, you should hate being at the top.
Yeah.
You should be the position you want to run away from, but just out of just obligation to the state, you're forced to do it.
Yeah.
So who's happy in the Republic, by the way? Because he said specifically, we don't care about the happiness of the people, only about the entire system.
I'm sure the system is happy.
Yeah.
It's not the bronze souls. It's not the gold souls. It's questionably the silver souls.
Wow.
But silver souls are just being bizarre marriage number sex and going to war for kissing time.
Yeah. I'm sure they're happy when it's kissing time. Don't worry.
Or some of them are.
Some of them. Half of
the winners are happy when it's kissing time.
Yeah.
The rest can endure. That's your place in this world.
And you're good at it.
Yeah.
You're really good at it. So.
Just act justly. Come on. Okay, now we're on this. Did you find it interesting how Meno's original definition of virtue ended up becoming Plato's definition of justice?
So,
Said,
you mean like there's the virtue for the man, there's the virtue for the woman, like in other words, like the mind your business.
Yeah. So the virtue is acting in accordance with your role in society. Acting appropriately in accordance with your role in society was how Meno defined being virtue, which is kind of what Socrates defined justice in the Republic. He said, it's doing your job and only your job.
I guess eventually the big difference there would be that in his republic, the system itself is pointed toward the good, whereas they don't know that in the regular Athenian society, right? It's not pointed in the right direction. So therefore, doing their roles is actually maybe in a strange way not virtuous because it's not pointed in the right direction.
Yeah. I suppose. Yeah. I mean, especially if you consider virtue along with that nuance of excellence, right? They're kind of a ship in the wrong direction. Wow, these republic metaphors are coming back again and again.
Yeah, it would be kind of bizarre to say that. Actually, is if you think of virtue in the form of excellent, then that's a bizarre definition Meno gave you, because acting like a woman's supposed to be is the way to be excellent.
Yeah.
Okay, then how do you be an excellent woman? And if just doing what you're supposed to do is being excellent somehow.
I think that's about all I had. You have anything else, you guys?
No, I don't. I really enjoyed this dialogue.
I enjoyed it quite a bit.
There's a lot. In fact, I think there's too much here.
Yeah, there's more here. I'd kind of like if I had more time to think about and pry out. There's so much here to think about in this dialogue. I would like to even come back to it again sometime in the future.
Definitely on our list.
Yeah. This is really good.
To all of our viewers who are still with us, we thank you very much for watching to the end. And the Meno, great dialogue. Really kind of hard to work through. Don't give up. Look into it. It's well over by the time you see this video, but if you have a chance, perhaps next January, you might be able to check out Professor Hobo's Coursera class, Reason and Persuasion, thinking through 3 dialogues by Plato. I think this gets the seal of approval from all 3 of us, correct?
Oh, excellent. Love Professor Hobo. He's great.
That's probably one of the best philosophy teachers you can get, so check it out. He makes Batman and World of Warcraft jokes. All
right. I guess, that's it for us today then, and next time we'll come back with something new. All right, I guess I'll catch you later, Internet. Yeah.